right. For you to have or integrate gender into your program, first you have to understand the cultural background and what the gender means in your context. So gender awareness is prerequisite for all gender integrated interventions, and we strive to move from gender blind to gender aware, because when we've talked of gender lens, we are saying we want to deeply analyze the situation of gender in the context of the culture, in the context of the age, in the context of the race, in the context of time, so that we be understanding the gender issues that are there. All right, gender blind. If a project is a gender blind, we say it ignores. Your project ignores totally the set of economic, social, and political roles, right, responsibilities, obligations, and power relations associated with being male or female, and dynamics between and among men and women, boys and girls. So here simply what we're saying, if your project is gender blind, which I don't think if there is any donor would accept such a project, is we ignore that, and the assumption is that male and female, or men and women, there is no difference, or if there is difference, then we don't want to consider it, or being considering about the political and social and economic roles, rights, responsibilities, and obligation. So every project should be gender aware. And what is gender aware? In gender aware, we are going, if a project is gender aware, we are going to examine and address gender considerations and adopt approach along continuum. So here what we are saying is that our project should examine and addresses gender consideration. Remember, gender differs in terms of roles, rights, responsibilities, obligations, and power relations in economics, social, and political of different gender. So we have to, every project should be gender aware. And when we say gender aware, we examine and address. So let's look at levels of gender awareness. Meal methods, that is monitoring and evaluation, learning methods, methods and activities can help project understand gender. So as a staff of monitoring and evaluation, you are the one to help the project to understand gender, because we want to go from gender blind to gender aware, beginning with understanding the role of gender in problem you are seeking to address, thinking about gendered aspect of the program objective, and ways to measure gender differences in inputs, outputs, that is outputs in outcome and impact. So we are saying we try to understand gender in the problem. If we are talking about most of young people in Kenya are unemployed, then from that problem, we want to see what proportion of female are unemployed and what proportion of male are unemployed. So from there, we are starting seeing that there is an issue again. Even if there is an issue that most of the people are unemployed, then we can also see an issue about the gender. And also the impact or effect of this problem can affect people differently. For example, if this is just an example, if it leads to crime rate in male, then it might lead to early pregnancy and early marriages in female. So that is how the problem at the root can affect different groups differently, and we seek to look for solution in our project, and also what is the proportion. So those are what monitoring and evaluation helps us to understand in the design of our project. The goal of gender integration is to move towards gender transformative program, because we want to understand and make our program to be gender sensitive. So let's look at the levels of this gender awareness. All right, gender exploitative. So a program or a project can be gender exploitative. The program that intentionally reinforces or take advantage of gender inequalities and stereotyping. So for example, I want to come up with a project, and in my project, let's say I want to get a leadership in my county, maybe, and I know that men are the head of households, maybe in a context. This is just purely an example. All right, then in my recruitment procedure, since I know that men are influential in the household, then I decide to pick only men in the decision making positions. Then what I'm doing in there is I'm exploiting, or my program is gender exploitative. All right, that intentionally reinforces or take advantage of gender inequalities and stereotyping in the culture. Gender accommodating. If a project is gender accommodating, this is what we are saying. Your project acknowledges gender, but only work around gender differences and inequalities. You don't want to balance. You don't want to being fair. You say the highest proportion of female are not employed compared to young men, and I know that it leads to early pregnancies and early marriages, and among men it leads to this type. Now in my project, I'm not being considerate anything about this. I give them the same training program, the same curriculum, the same content. I give them the same grants, if there is. I give them the same training. I don't consider the completion rate. I don't consider the venue of the training. I don't consider the type that is there. In that case now, gender accommodating. My project is gender accommodating. I know the differences exist, but I don't take any action. All right, let's look at gender transformative. The program that strives to examine, question, and change underlying conditions, the norm and power imbalances to promote gender equity. Now, in this case, I look at, for example, considering my county leadership, I look at what is there. There is power imbalances. Women are not having the roles in decision making, and this is what I want to do. So in that case, I'm going to examine what is there and why is this the way it is, and change the condition. Train the public on the importance of having women in the leadership, for example, and of course having them in the leadership. Give them incentive or in political position. Give them a free nomination in my party, and so that I can change the underlying condition. Let's look at gender synchronized program. This one, rich men, boys, women, and girls of all sexual orientations and gender identities in intentional and mutually reinforcing way to change gender norms, address inequalities, and increase well-being. So this even goes beyond being transformative to a level of addressing everything around gender inequalities and promoting well-being of all this group regardless of their gender. So that is why it is important to be gender aware, and when you become gender aware in your project, be gender transformative, and be gender synchronized. In our next class, we are going to look at having gender analysis in our project process. I hope this is helpful. Thank you and enjoy learning.